Thanks everyone for coming. This is our inaugural Southwest Futurists. Please use the hashtag. This event is something that I kind of felt had in some other places in the UK, and I felt that it would be interesting to have something which was kind of future techno-social discussions and talks in the Bristol and Southwest area. This is the first one, which is all about AI, behaviour and ethics. Thank you to Pervasive for having us here. Thank you for you all for coming, and I'll say this at the end. This is all about kind of this community, so please feedback to me, get involved, ask about other themes that we can put on, other speakers, sponsors, venues and things, and we can have kind of a mixture of really interesting discussions and talks about different subjects, which you also might be able to do, basically. So this is going to be an hour-long, 2 20-minute talks and then questions. So if you've got anything which you're dying to get out, wait until the end, till the talk is over. You've got 10 minutes of questions, and then we'll move on to the next person. And at the end, we can all go for a drink, go home, have food, whatever. Yes, so this is the first one. I've organised a couple of other ones. One's a talk about quantum computing, because I think it's a very interesting area as well. And we've got a couple of people from Bristol University coming down to talk to us about that. We've got another talk about green ethics, and we're also looking at design and the death of branding, controversial. So we're kind of a mixture of things, and this is when I really like your input on kind of what is it, the things that you think are missing from talks that you see in Bristol, or other things that you might be interested in. So I'm going to talk about machine ethics for 20 minutes without hesitation, deviation, no. And I have a couple of images. So machine ethics, I'm Ben Byford. Hello. I did a talk a year ago at Digital Shoreditch in London, and they asked me to do a talk about the Internet of Things. And when I was talking to people about researching the Internet of Things and what was interesting in your home and security and things like that, I felt like most of the more interesting questions were coming out of how the technology is going to affect us, affect our behaviour. It could harm us, people could get into your homes, and it was kind of more overarching questions rather than the, what technical protocol should I use for my fridge thing. So it's kind of, and then I did talk about machine ethics there instead. And I found that there's a lot of discussion about this in academia, but not so much in the public domain. So the idea of this talk is kind of really to give you an overview of what this kind of might mean, what the academics are talking about, and what you should maybe talk about amongst yourselves and in your businesses. So this is a fridge. Okay, so the future is now, and it's innocuous in some instances, and not so much in others, right? And these are quite good images for kind of exemplifies the rest of my talk, because they are algorithms and machines that are embedded in our lives today. So let's imagine that you have a company, right? Maybe you have a startup and you're interested in making a brand new automated vehicle, and you've got it all sorted out, you've got your investors, you're building this thing, and then you get it on the, you get these things built, and then maybe a month down the line, someone calls you up and goes, we've had a lot of cat killings with these cars over the last month. And maybe you think about it for a while and you're like, that's interesting, our algorithms that we made are, have ethically sound decisions built into them. Maybe, the system's working correctly, there's no errors there, but maybe the outcome of the system itself is just a few dead cats, and we could work on that. Maybe instead you're worried about bad press from all these dead cats everywhere, and maybe you really like cats, and really like cats. So maybe you change the algorithm slightly so that you have less cats, or maybe you recognise the cats better. Maybe the repercussions of making that change then end up killing a person. And maybe all of this is still within the remit of the program and everything's working correctly. Okay? So nothing's broken, there's no viruses in the system. These are just the systems that we are making decisions about today. And some of these things are as listed. They're kind of all around us: automated cars, stock exchange algorithms, fridges, guiding systems, drones, all sorts of things. And machine ethics is really about how we should, how these things should react to us, how they can be harmful to us, possibly, and how these things eventually, this is kind of more Terminator and stuff, how these things maybe will feel about us in the future. I haven't really used the term AI yet, and this should really be really big and more imposing. But I haven't really said AI yet because it's quite a confusing term, I think, and it can be used for all sorts of things, from voice recognition on your phone to robots that walk around and kill you. So you've got this kind of whole plethora of different ideas encapsulated in AI. So I'm not really talking about AI specifically because it's confusing, but I am talking about machine autonomy, and that can involve AI. But it's really about giving something autonomy, letting it make those decisions for us, not being aware of what those decisions might be. And in that way, machine ethics is actually kind of analogous to ethics itself. Because in order to codify ethics into a machine or a program or whatever it is, we have to understand what the ethic we want to code is. And as this line beautifully points out, there is still, after 2 millennium, there's still no real consensus, right, determine moral right or wrong. So we don't really know. We have all these different theories that we use, that we apply ethics to, and we have our laws which embed some of those things, and some of them are dogmatic in the way we do that. But we don't really know what those ethics are that we want. We don't know what the perfect world looks like. Yeah, so what are ethics, I guess, in the end? For us, they are different in kind of chemistry, in ideology, and in time. So each person might have their own ethic, or each group, or in history there might be different ideas of what was moral and what is immoral. And therefore, what should we code? So when we're talking about ethics, kind of you Google it and you get all these different descriptions of what ethics might be. But coming from it from a kind of a computer programming way, I've kind of stipulated that ethics is a set of guiding morals that can dictate future action or reaction of a being or feeling towards such actions, which is kind of convoluted, but it's basically you can describe what it is that you did or that someone else did, and whether that was a good thing or a bad thing to do. I don't know how much anyone knows about ethics, so let me inform you. So there's big schools of thought, mainly utilitarian or consequentialist ethics. There's loads of stuff to talk about any of these things, but these are the kind of big headlines when philosophers talk about, or that I've come across in researching this. Utilitarian is basically the outcome has to be the best for the happiness of all people, for the most amount of people. Okay? So it doesn't matter what it is that you did, necessarily, but as long as the outcome is the best that it could possibly be. So you don't care what it is that you do, what the action is. You might accidentally tread on someone, but as long as everyone else is happy, then that's effectively good. The flip of the coin to that is deontological, or duty-based, or Kantianism theory, which is kind of you have a duty towards man or your fellow man, and those duties are kind of rules that you can't break. So thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not pillage, and all those sorts of things. There's a kind of duty rules, and the example they always give in philosophy for why this is problematic would be a mass murderer comes to your door and asks for your friend, and you're obliged at that point not to lie, because lying is a duty which is bad, apparently. So you tell the murderer that your friend's around the corner, he's hiding from them, and then the murderer presumably goes and kills your friend. So you might say that actually you might want to lie at that point, but then lying leads to, and then you get into this kind of like round robin of horrible things. So the last one is kind of virtue ethics. And this is Aristotle time thinking, where they're thinking about how it would be to be more godly. So everyone is trying to imbue the best of belief and behaviour in themselves to be more like a god, because the gods are the most wise and wonderful beings. So they talk about well-being, and well-being is exuded through reactions to people and actions to your fellow man. So you want people to be good to you, and they and vice versa, basically. So you'll be good to them. And virtue, I think, next slide's a bit confused, is the most interesting here with the machine ethics, because if we say that we make an ethical computer or algorithm, it might be that this machine is much more virtuous than we can ever be, because it doesn't drink, it doesn't have groups of people that it has cahoots with. This machine doesn't actually have to feed or do all these other things, biological things. So in fact, we could, if you were looking at a positive outlook on these things, be making something which is far more ethical than we could ever be. And this slide is confused, apparently. Yeah, but perhaps interacting with an ethical robot might someday even inspire us to behave more ethically ourselves. Possibly. I've also written here, which you can't really see, machines seem to have no ethical imperative. And you think about us as biological beings, we have imperatives to sustain ourselves, to socialise to a certain extent, to reproduce. And the computers just, or the things that we may make, don't necessarily have those embedded imperatives, and therefore can't commit a lie or do things which are necessarily unethical. Sorry, I'm having problems with slides. Hey. Oh, it's just broken. That's useful. Okay, well, we'll just have to read through the virtue. So how does one give ethics to machines? That is a good question, Ben. So, asking you these questions. So there's different ways of going, and I'm sure that lots of people here have an idea of kind of the AI side of things and the buzzwords about how people are making amazing things, and Uber and things like that these days. And some of these relate to these examples. So implicit just basically refers to, we can make something which has like rules embedded, and that's kind of like the Kantian way of putting it. So it might have a chip, or it might have a set of rules, and you can't get away from those rules. And it's very much like the 3 rules of robotics. Thou shalt not kill someone, thou shalt not harm themselves unless... so you could build these rules in, but then later down 10 years' time or so, they become dogmatic, and you don't necessarily want that. Or you could have interactive ethics, so something that learns. So machine learning comes in here. We could build something which feeds off lots of data about car crashes, for example, crashing into cats. Why is it that so many cats are dying? We look at the data, okay, well, the machine's learning not to kill cats, and we can change the things in the systems And the last one's explicit, which is just, it's basically a being, and it's learning itself what is right and wrong, or that actions are bad for us, basically. And you're basically, lots of people talk about explicit machine ethics or full moral agents. It's almost like teaching a child how to behave in the world. Some people say that ethics is not definable, it's not implementable, because it is, you have to have a consciousness to do it, basically. And to these people, I say, great, what are we going to do with all these automated cars that we've got killing cats and people and stuff? It's not really an argument, because whether you call it ethics in a system, we still have to do something to the system in order to it for us to exist with the robots. If the robots were sitting on their own, in their own little game, killing each other, that'd be great. It'd be fine. We wouldn't have to worry about these things. But as soon as one of them can run you over, then we have to sort of make these systems which can live with us and vice versa. So probably the last bit of what I'm going to talk about briefly now, before we start questions, is it's interesting that this stuff is being talked about in academia and a little bit in private sector, but it actually impacts us all. And as I've shown before, there's no universal way of doing it. So shouldn't we all be talking about what it is that we want and how our society should be built on these things, these automated vehicles, these automated crafts, these automated stock exchanges? So we have an opinion that we should put out for these things. And are the people that are making these things the people that we want to represent us? Are they the people with the integrity, or are they dangerous because they have all the knowledge and don't have the integrity? Right? So are our programmers, our scientists, are entrepreneurs who often come across as narcissists or people that maybe get ahead because of other reasons, because they don't have fully developed social skills, maybe, to unleash these types of products on us? Should we have more of a discussion on these things? Yes is the answer to that, just in case you're wondering. And lastly, there's a quote which is about education from Aristotle, which reads, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." And I think this kind of encapsulates, this could be you can stick this quote on the back of any presentation, really, it's beautiful, but in here, it represents the fact that I believe, the rest of this is relatively subjective, but I believe that education could be a starting point for developing technologies in the future which have embedded ethics in them, right? So we are teaching ethical business practice, ethical design practice, ethical programming practice, and it's not sidelined by other people who have to think about that. The philosophers will come up with that. The lawyers will have to come up with that. Oh no, someone's been run over, I have to come. So, these things have to be discussed before they actually do run away from us. And that is it. Sorry about the slides breaking. So I did that in precisely around the right time. Is there any questions? And don't be shy. Right.
Do you have any examples of really great AI or really great machine learning or machine ethics? Is there a tangible real world thing that we can talk about in terms of this?
Do you know of any?
No, I mean that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. No, I think because we're still kind of navigating how we should implement the stuff in the first place. So a lot of machine learning stuff is like about learning how pictures work and how, once we get past that level of infancy, we'll probably have those systems which are capable of doing better things and more varied things, and that's where we come into trouble, because we'll give those systems more autonomy to do things that we don't need to do, and make decisions about, which is where the problems start coming in. And I mean, the picture at the beginning with the Tesla stuff, I mean, this stuff is happening right now. It just so happens that cars are very good at knowing how far a car in front of it is. You know, and that's really great, but it doesn't necessarily know much about the world or how it should. So at the moment, this person is required to take control of the wheel and to actually defer the ethical judgment to the person about when it comes into a difficult situation. And further down the line, it's actually going to be quicker and probably more effective and efficient to give that decision making to the machine. Imagine going about 100 miles an hour towards something. You have a split second to make that decision, and actually the system might be quicker at making that decision, and you won't have a choice anymore. And that's coming quickly because you're less good at this, not you specifically, but we are less good at making split-second decisions. But the lawyers, it's easier for the lawyers and people who are concerned with breakages and cost and things like that to defer it to a person, a human being. Currently, yeah.
One of your slides earlier on said ethics requires thinking and feeling, but at the same time it's not conscious. Just wondering, how can it be not conscious if it requires thinking and feeling? That's the first part. The second part is, for AI to be truly AI, doesn't whatever it is that has this artificial intelligence need to be self-aware?
Yeah, no, but I mean, when I was talking about AI being a confusing term, that's what lots of people say. They use the term superintelligence now, or general AI, because a conscious thing isn't an algorithm that discovers cat pictures on YouTube. It just isn't, right? But those terms of AI are used for both of those things. And you're right, like a conscious thing, like an artificial being, you could teach that, presumably, how to be ethical, rather than embedding it with ethics.
But you can program
Well, you can do both.
behaviors,
Yeah,
but that doesn't necessarily mean it has ethics. It's
No.
just obeying the program.
yes.
So the ethics go down to the person programming the thing,
Yeah.
eventually.
Which leads on to the next question was,
Mm-hmm.
then whose ethics?
Yeah, exactly. Who is ethics?
And just on that point, although there isn't a consensus on ethics, there is a consensus on international human rights law that you could apply in this context, both as the people around that environment being rights holders, but the machine having responsibilities and the builders of that technology having responsibilities, and also business and human rights, which is a developing field as well.
Yeah, I mean, the human rights, some of the laws and the human rights that we have at the moment are great for very specific things, right? If you're going to have a head-on collision with a tree or something, then you could probably make some assumptions about a better outcome in that scenario. The system probably knows that it doesn't want to endanger the person within the system, within the car, for example, and that's embedded in the system. That we've literally written a bit of code that says, try not to kill people in your car. But in different circumstances, maybe there's two cars, there's a head-on collision coming, and it becomes a bit more muddied, you know. So, is there preservation? There's lots of talk about. I mean, this is symptomatic of capitalism, right, or greed, you could say. That some people are worried about what the car is going to damage itself in this scenario, rather than the people involved. So maybe the car would make a decision that it wants to preserve itself, so it's going to drive in a certain way, so that the insurers pay out less on and all these things get like embedded in the machines themselves, in the algorithms.
Like HAL 9000.
Yeah.
Like
Or
Yeah. So the machines might do stuff that we generally, as a civilization, don't want to do because they've been thought of by this one person who's a lawyer, or this one person who's a scientist, and they have a certain outlook on the world, right?
On that point, I guess it comes down to how much do you value human life. against the machine.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So,
Yeah.
And as things are developing at such a rate, and these machines are only going to get, well, they will get more expensive. What you're describing in some cases.
Not necessarily. It's only going. I would. You can presume that it's going to get less expensive.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those matter of time things now. That people are investing a lot of their energies into this sort of technology.
The thing is, it's not as simple as machine versus people, because you get. I mean, there's a
Cats.
classic. there's a classic ethical experiment, which is the trolley experiment, where there's a runaway railway trolley that's about to go down the line and kill someone who's sitting there. And you have the option to switch it onto another track and avoid it. What should you do? You should switch it onto the other track and avoid it. Now, supposing there's now two people that are going to be killed, and if you switch it, you would kill someone. Surely you should switch, because you'll kill one person instead of two. You ask people about this, they're split on this generally when they do surveys of it, because they think, well, no, you shouldn't interfere. You should let nature take its course and two people die and not kill that innocent person. And that's not to do with preserving the trolley. And exactly the same ethical issues will arise with autonomous vehicles.
Yeah. I mean, the trolley problem, as you described, is a great one for isolating a specific instance of some ethical judgment, right? And I'm prepped to do a version of the trolley problem, which is in ridicule of it, because you've got one problem that trains going down the track, it's going to kill some people. If you change the track, it's going to kill less people, right? So you have those two decisions. But when you're going down a road, you don't have two decisions. Or if you're walking down a road as a pedestrian, or if you're in a plane, or the real world doesn't exist in binary form. So to navigate that environment is much more complicated and difficult to grasp.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Doesn't the trolley problem, when it's going down one track,
Yeah.
and now the other, you're actually on one of the tracks?
So the first instance is you're on the train and you get to change the track.
Oh, you're actually on the track?
Yeah. So you can't stop the train, but you can change the track.
Right.
So you're implicitly making an action. And the other version of it is that you're actively killing someone in order to save more people. And people find that more difficult, even though you might be saving the same amount of people, because you're actively killing someone in doing that. But like I say, with the car stuff, we're effectively deferring that judgment. So we're saying, over here, we made this judgment ages ago, and now the car's playing out the judgment when they're faced with it. And one way to go would be, we can have a system that learns, and that's great. So we'll kill hundreds of people soon, and then it'll get less and less and less, maybe, perhaps. I don't know how it will play out effectively, but it's one scenario. Or we can embed it, or we can have a bit of both.
So there's a really interesting question around this, which is how many people are currently killed by cars driven by people?
Yeah.
And how many people are saved by cars driven by people? Because until we can do that,
I'm not saying that the cars specifically are bad, actually. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's an issue now.
I mean, the fact is the status quo. A lot of people get killed by cars. Whether this is a good thing or not, I don't know. But to suddenly say that autonomous vehicles must be perfect.
Yeah. Well,
in the current situation.
I'd love them to be perfect. And the scenario in which they would be perfect would be if they were in a simulation and they weren't interacting with us at all, right? But the best instance, there's other things other than automated cars that we can talk about. The fridge turning into your whole house, for example. Overnight, it's really, this is kind of, futurizing, but this is something that will happen. You'll have all the systems in your home, and they'll all be operating together and maybe making decisions. The car thing, lost my train of thought. But yeah, it'd be great if they were like trains, right? If they were autonomous and they only interacted with other automated cars and no wildlife or pedestrians, then it would work amazingly, and we should do it now. But the infrastructure to make that happen is going to be tremendous. So we have this kind of hybrid system, which is going to be cumbersome for a while, I presume, if they let it happen. Thank you. I'm going to move over now, once we're plugged in. Yeah. So if you have any other thoughts, talk amongst yourselves, or come and harass me afterwards. Oh yeah, and hashtag. Hashtag no cable connected. No, SWF.
No.
It's
Therefore, with technology,
Southwest Futurists.
Is it a program to manufacture the person who stays on the road?
I know that
Person
people
responsible
have
for the car.
Yeah.
That's international.
Yeah.
The convention set this up. Lots of things about
Yeah.
cars driving,
We spent like 20 minutes and yeah, that's super.
Yeah. So in other words, we really have to catch up with technology. We're all so behind on this today. That's the thing.
Do they?
well,
The way everything like I'm terrified of that. It makes sense when like you're having to be in place. It's a good one to start with.
I mean, I
Because I don't know how many countries I've seen trying to run it. It's like a challenge to make cars try to get out to
the problem is that
especially in rush
not
hour.
having the same principles as the same of effort.
But then in rush hour, it's but then we can't see no driving distance because I know that they would let you out. They're not being it's happening on technology and civil legislation.
That's a good point. We haven't got
Probably they just each other like how to
so what we're saying is just a
a car will let another car out, then if there's two people in the car, it needs to be let out, because that will mean two people will be happier because one person is
One person. And this car gets far out, that car's just thinking, oh, because that's what happens in my drive, and then there's a large drive here. And that's what the other thing, everything else we only concentrate on the accidents that happen.
and that's until
Until we do statistics of all these things. You don't know.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the first meeting of the Southwest Futurists. And thanks to Ben for inviting me today. I'm really happy to be here and speak to you guys tonight. So my name is Jennifer Whitney, and I'm a research fellow here in the studio, and I work with the Digital Cultures Research Center. And my project is called The Automation of Everyday Life, which explores the cultural anxieties and kind of the cultural expectations around automation. And anytime I tell people about this, they kind of start to tell me about their anxieties about automation. So I thought that I would dedicate today's talk to kind of unpacking anxieties in a certain way. Also, I am a lecturer at Cardiff University in the English Lit department, and I do a lot of work on like cultural history, so that's going to come up a lot in this talk today as well. And I'm also working on a book about dolls and automata, and you'll see a lot of these interests kind of overlapping in this talk. So I am very happy to chat more about this afterwards, or if you want to send me an email, there's my email address, and I would love to kind of hear what you guys have to say. Okay. So, following on from Ben's interesting talk, I'd like to then, as I mentioned, discuss this tricky, anxious-filled discussion around humans and machines. description that I gave Ben about what I was going to be talking about was pretty general as well. So I'd like to begin by kind of walking you through what I'm going to talk about, and then I'll jump into it. So I'll start us off with some context, a bit of cultural history, as I mentioned, and I'd like to explore this cultural history of the human-machine relationship. So that's things like robots and automaton, androids, things like this. So in other words, I'd like to begin by exploring how the present and the future is rooted in the past. Okay, so then I'll go on from there to discuss how these inventions, these robots and things, later inform additional forms of automation and artificial intelligence. And I hope that this will then open up a broader discussion for us. So, okay, from there, I'll suggest some of the contemporary and varying perspectives on ideas of automation, artificiality, and machine intelligence. So, what are some of our impressions? What are some of our expectations? And in particular, what are our cultural worries about the relationship between humans and machines? Oh dear, my notes are messed up. Oops. Sorry guys. Okay. So I'm interested in how these concerns arise. How are we dealing with issues of the cultural moment? And in particular, I want to talk about language too. What language are we using to talk about these concerns? And then from here, I'd like to suggest, I'd like to conclude by asking, what does this stuff point to? So let's look at the context then. So technology, automation and smart machines have shaped and continue to change virtually all aspects of contemporary life, from the domestic sphere to many forms of work and leisure. And I think we're all familiar with the trusty but also troubling image of robotic technology intervening to make life easier, which often is attributed to kind of 1950s American futurism. But the phenomenon of human life engaged with and changed by machines is not as new as it may seem. So, the word robot, for example, comes from the 1920s. But the idea of the robot is much, much older. It's older than the radio, it's older than the telegraph, the light bulb, the train, even the printing press. It dates way back to antiquity. So thinkers in ancient Greece, in Egypt, in China, they were all conjuring up these ideas of intelligent machines and spinning tales around notions of automation and artificial life. So Pygmalion, as illustrated here, hopefully, yeah, is one such story from ancient Greece. It's about a man who breathes life into a statue that he carved. And in fact, the ancient Greeks seemed pretty fascinated with this narrative. That is, this narrative of creating life out of inert objects. There are stories of robot servants to the gods, and of lots and lots of stories about kind of these bronze and gold statues kind of coming to life. But the actual mechanics of lifelike machines, movable statues with automated parts, took a bit longer to materialize. Inventors were working on them for centuries, but in the West, in the early 1700s, there were great strides in automation. I think all of my notes are backwards. Fingers crossed that that's what's happened. Okay. Right, so yes, that's what's happened, I hope. Okay, so in fact, in the 18th century, we can understand it as a time of fascination with these types of human and sometimes animal-like machines. So during this time, there were things like automated worms that could actually crawl around and that still work today. And there's a YouTube video of this, which is super cool, so I encourage you to check that out. But not only automated worms that were bejeweled and given to kings and queens, but there's also kind of dolls that were playing instruments. And this is Marie Antoinette playing a dulcimer. It really works. You can still hear it. You can watch that on YouTube as well. So this was going on all in the 1700s, and it was creeping along quite nicely until things went a bit too far. And they went a bit too far with the invention of what is known as the Mechanical Turk. And there he is, the Mechanical Turk. This was an invention that was introduced to the public and intellectuals alike at the end of the century. And the reception was phenomenal. People were so into this machine that seemed to be able to play a mean game of chess and win. It confounded everybody. But it turned out to be an elaborate hoax. So there was a really skilled chess player hidden inside the little box there, making all of the moves, and this is kind of the mechanism of how the chess player hidden inside would kind of move the hands around to make these moves. So this created a serious backlash in the culture, this and several other things. But I'm going to come back to this backlash in a minute. But first I want to say, because this is such a quick talk, if you are interested in this period of time, there are two really great books that I think talk about it in a lot of detail. And one is called Sublime Dreams and Living Machines by Min-Soo Kang, the one over here. And the other one is called Living Dolls by Gabby Wood. And they both kind of detail all of the mechanisms of this kind of early automation. Okay, so these early automated machines are mirrored by more sophisticated automata, robots, and computers in the last 50 years ago or so. So we've been seeing computers that actually can win at checkers, solve math equations and word problems. And indeed in 1997, a computer called Deep Blue became the first computer chess playing system to beat a reigning chess champion named Garry Kasparov. And incidentally, Kasparov also thought that this was a hoax. He couldn't believe that something like a computer could beat him at chess. So, additionally, and in the last few decades or so, there has been this dawn in robotic technology. So we can see that there are service robots now servicing multiple needs, from like a concierge service, like this robot here, but also there are medical robots, things like bionic eyes and customizable internet-savvy homes and apps and fitness technology, and as Ben discussed in detail, driverless cars. And there's even like new emotion recognition tools. So computers that are able to kind of identify whether a person is surprised or sad, and that it's at the early stages of this right now. So all of these kind of things have come into the mix, refining a reality of human-machine relationships that was imagined in ancient times. Okay, so this abbreviated lineage I outlined is packed with cultural significance. It elucidates, it can be used to shed light upon current issues. Ancient, medieval, and early modern stories continue to hint at and speak to our ongoing hopes and fears around technology. For example, and this is another Greek example, ancient Greek example, Prometheus, a story about how fire was stolen and harnessed from the gods to benefit humanity. This term and this story emerges when the limits of what we consider human are being tested. And this story too, Prometheus, is what influenced Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1818. And the intertwining themes here of Prometheus with a narrative, with Shelley's narrative of animating the inanimate, in this early work of science fiction, has subsequently also given name to a lot of our fears. So this idea of Franken foods is just one example of this. But we can see in the media quite often that Frankenstein is a term that's placed on to kind of especially biological changes or changes in biology that are influenced by technology. It's kind of a go-to term. So again, these stories provide a label for moments of scientific and technological discovery where there is attention. The scientist who seems to have the urge to play God, an invention that tests the limits of what is human, these are where these labels start to pop up. So then there's a broad cultural history that foregrounds the hopes, the fears, and these issues of ethics of contemporary human-machine relationships, and leaves us asking lots of questions about things like, is it right to use technology to change food? Or is it safe? Is it ethical to alter genes? Is it acceptable to have a robot as a companion? These are the issues that come up here. So as much as we as a culture anticipate ideas about progress in human-machine relationships, we often talk about them in anxious terms. So the Mechanical Turk, returning to that little story, can reveal more about this. At its heart, this self-moving, life-imitating automaton appears to reflect back to us what we think of as human. So at the height of the automation craze of the 1700s, these technologically sophisticated machines were seen as pioneering, as innovative, really and truly amazing, wonderful, and also sometimes frightening. And so too was human progress, understood in these terms. But for a variety of reasons, including the Mechanical Turk hoax, but certainly not limited to it, the collective cultural opinion about human-machine started to shift in the 19th century. And with this shift, automata were no longer seen as symbols of advancement. Instead, they were figures that became go-to metaphors to describe people, and describe people as lacking in independence, in originality, in vitality, in creativity. So they were called automata. And like the use of Frankenstein to describe anything scientifically unsettling, we can still see remnants of this in our language today as well. So while calling someone an automaton may seem like an outdated insult, words like robot or even calling someone plastic are hurled at an arbiter's seemingly not so bright victim. And I think that this can also be, a case can be made for the word drone as well, but in the last few years, this word has taken on a more complex meaning. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is a tension in perception around human-machine relationships and how this is highlighted in language. And these tensions call attention to questions about what is human, what is machine, who controls who, and what does all of this end up looking like? These tensions and anxieties exist, but that's not to say that we as a culture are not excited about technology as well. But there seems to be a contradiction in meaning when we think and we talk about human-machine relationships. There's this contradiction of the wondrous and the horrifying, as well as the boring and indeed dangerously boring and mechanical. So certainly, if you comb through the current headlines, or let the computer algorithm do it for you, we can see this contradiction firsthand. So there's this concern that smart machines will take our jobs, or they will enslave us, or kill us. There's this kind of malevolent Terminator-style AI rhetoric that comes up. But alongside this, we're told that smart machines will make our homes completely customizable. One room can be a comfortable, I don't know, I'm thinking in Fahrenheit all of a sudden now, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while another room can be 40 degrees Fahrenheit and be quite chilly if no one's in there. But we also are told that these kinds of machines can save us from the dangers of global warming, for example, or end warfare. And alongside this, we're also urged to consider what are the limits of this relationship. Are we becoming cyborgs? Where does the human end and the machine begin? And simultaneously, we're also warned that all of this is too fanciful, and we're urged to return to a more systematic idea of what the human-machine relationship is meant to do. But this, too, can be understood as threatening when machines do what they do best. Yet, we have heard all of this before. We have seen how automation that promised to make life easier really intrudes upon the personal, with interfaces now affecting every aspect of our lives. So, like those who encountered the Mechanical Turk, we too are quite skeptical. So, indeed, there is nothing older than the fear of the new. So where does this leave us? A quick look at the history shows us that our contemporary anxieties are anything but contemporary themselves. They're old, they're antiquated, they are ancient fears. And even the words we use to describe the latest gadget have deep roots in the past. From this, we can surmise that such anxieties are probably here to stay. So what can be done about this? I think that rather than becoming inert ourselves, I'd like to suggest that these anxieties can be used to take a moment to pause and reflect upon where we have come from and where we are going in the future of automation and human-machine relationships. Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions?
How do you think we go about changing? I personally believe that people are scared of technology without it being particularly rational. Like you're saying, it's kind of embedded in history. I kind of feel like actually we're scared of people, and that if you remember that humans create technology, then it's kind of that you're just scared of the potential for people doing the wrong thing, which is terrifying, obviously, and will continue to be so forever. But how do you think we can change the perception of technology as this evil, overlord that's going to come and enslave us and kill us all?
I think that it is really interesting because I feel like quite excited about technology, and I was very surprised when I started talking to people about my project, and they were very nervous about automation and about machines coming to kill us all. And I think that part of that anxiety, part of that fear is also when things become more and more advanced, only a specific group of people can work on them and know their inner workings and fix them if they run amok as well. So I think so if kind of ideas of technology become more democratized and people have more access to them, then I think that is one way of kind of dealing with those issues. But yeah, I also think that all of this anxiety about technology is really an anxiety about the human. It's about kind of what our limits are, about what we make and what we do to each other when we make those things, and also kind of what we do to kind of put up virtual walls between ourselves too. So yeah. Thanks.
I was going to just say, it's kind of the irrational fear, I guess, for my part, is where do the rewards of such advances go? Who do they go to? And I guess it goes back to human nature of being, as a person says, scared about what other people, about their ethics, I guess. Really. And how we can make it so, as you were saying, more democracy. How would you see us being able to democratize?
Yeah, I think that it is there are so many systems of power in place that it's very difficult to imagine kind of like a pure democracy of how we can have these technological advances that reach everyone. And I think that's a major fear and concern. And I don't know how we can democratize. I wish I did. It'd be amazing. But I think that it is a question of education and access and and providing resources to not just a very kind of elite and privileged few.
So you talked a lot about the history and culture of robotics, and I guess I was interested whether, so I think back to the past and how they viewed technology advancing and the benefits they saw, flying cars that didn't come true, and the negatives that they didn't see happening, the detaching of people through social media. Is there anything about the past we can determine if there's anything about the past we can use to determine about our future
Yeah.
problems or potential benefits that might come up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's so important about looking at the past when you're talking about the future. Is, I mean, everything about it, I think, is really, no matter what you're interested in, you can look at something from the past that kind of will help you get a better understanding of what these technological objects are. I can't really think of a specific example right now. But yeah, I think that it's just like, for me, for example, I started off doing contemporary media studies, and all of my research was kind of from the 1990s to the present. And kind of over the course of the last couple of years, I've started looking at examples of culture and literature from the 1700s and especially the 1800s. And even though I never thought there were connections with my research about like identity and femininity and those kinds of things, I just found that reading it broadly opens it up so much. So I guess it's a more general thing that I'm talking about. Yeah. Thanks.
I wonder whether sometimes some of the language that we talk about these sorts of technologies is kind of just muddying the waters and kind of making the whole kind of language feel worse. We talk about, and I think this is something I read, we kind of talk about self-driving cars or artificial intelligence or a computer that can play a game of chess, but that's not really what's happening. We're talking about a kind of a computer with sensors that can take some data and crunch the numbers and then perform an action. And if we put enough of these together, then, so we're kind of continuing with kind of talking about these things as if they are human, and that's kind of where the anxiety comes from.
Yeah.
Kind of just thought about them as the kind of nuts and bolts of technology that they are, then we might be able to move more forward on then some of the other, about the implications of how we deploy.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because I think that like it kind of harks back to this idea of like human progress, and are we kind of harnessing the power of the gods by naming these things in this way, right? If we're calling things like artificial intelligence or artificial life, when we could be calling them, the nuts and bolts that you described, like, because that is what's happening. It would demystify in that way.
Sure, it's a mistake to imagine a separation though between the two, because what is happening is it's a steady merger of the two. So it's not humans and then the nuts and bolts. It's all steadily merging, and it's merging faster and faster.
Right.
And in terms of your point with the minority, having power, I think that's unavoidable, because whilst the super rich in the 80s were the first to get material advantages on mobile phones, the super rich in the 2050s will have physiological upgrades. And so you will, I imagine, a gradual sort of species split, I suppose. So you have Homo sapiens, and then the super rich get more and more physiological advantages. They live longer, they have better memory, better intelligence, they're better networked, they have better knowledge, they can make more money, they have an exponential feedback, and the species split goes faster and faster until you get to a super race. And that super race isn't the nuts and bolts terminated thing, that's just the human being exponentially evolving.
Right. And I think that's really important too, because that is that tension. That is like, that embodies like where the machine ends and the human begins and vice versa.
I think you can see that reflected in literature as well, like the time machine.
Yeah.
So,
Historically, the technology doesn't necessarily get rolled out to the super rich. It often gets rolled out to people that can, the workers, the people that are maybe doing difficult tasks. If you think about, let's say, I don't want to go off on one, did you say, think about Vietnam or the experimental drugs, experimental technologies to keep people awake for long periods of time. often those technologies get rolled out to, let's say, military troops, civilians, rather than the super rich. So it's more complex, is all I'm saying.
I feel like this discussion could end up going down a rabbit hole because and I'm sure you have lots of things to say about how the future should be. I told someone that I said that I would give them a shout out. Has anyone got anything, has anyone, as well as this man, got anything else that they can share with us that is coming up in the next couple of weeks that we should be aware of and we should go to, and that's your cue? Yeah?
Yes. Thursday, 21st at Hamilton House, there's a panel discussion on robots and autonomous systems. And it's basically how will development in robots, everything we talk about here, how will that affect the lives of your children? And it's run by the British Science Association. I'm chair of the branch, and it's free. You have to register by Eventbrite. There's still some places left.
What time's it on?
It's from 6:30. The panel discussion will be 7:30, but at a minimal time, coffee and tea and nibbles, and that sort of stuff beforehand. It's an interesting venue we haven't used before, so fingers crossed it all works. If you want to sign up for it, British Science Association website, look on Eventbrite. I would have brought some stuff here, but I forgot that I was coming.
You could also post it on the group discussion board as well.
Sorry?
If you post it on the discussion board on the meetup group, then people can click on it and go.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one, but I'll...
Yeah, on the meetup page. Just post it, information about it there.
I didn't know there was one, so... Yeah.
Okay, there is.
And also if anybody wants any me send information, I'll just give me your email and I'll send it.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, okay.
Not to hijack this, but the Vantage Festival, also something you might be interested in, it's going on February 12th to 19th. So it's various talks and workshops and things like that, so community sort of open digital stuff. Check that out, Google it, Bath Digital Festival. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all. Thank you to viewers who've got on YouTube, possibly. And I hope this has been interesting, and I hope that you stay for 10 minutes and then join us in the bar, or that I see you all next time, and that if anyone wants to get involved, they do so and they contact me on the meetup group, and that they tweet about this and they tell me all the wonderful things that they want to see in the future.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
For a second, that's not terrible. When I played it before, it's quite hard to